Hello my friends, in today's video we will take a look at Sony FE-PZ 16-35mm f4G. High quality f4 wide angle zoom was one of the last lenses missing in otherwise great E-mount lens selection. Fortunately that is no longer the case because Sony has released this power zoom 16-35 with a promise of great image quality in a compact package. In this video we will take a look at the performance and the feature set of 16-35G, and I will try to help you decide whether you should consider getting one. 16-35mm is a classic versatile ultra-wide to wide angle focal range. It is particularly suitable for landscapes, cities, architecture, interiors, vlogging, and so on. Combining this range with f4 aperture makes a lot of sense in my opinion. Subject separation usually isn't the top priority at these angles, and f4 isn't that bad for low light shooting either, since the in-body image stabilization is very effective at these focal lengths. Importantly, f4 aperture allows this lens to be incredibly small and light. It is just 88mm long and it weighs 353 grams, which is shockingly light. It is lighter than 20mm f1.8G prime by 20 grams. The weight and the size is one of the biggest strengths of 16-35G. The build quality is the same as with most recent Sony lenses, which means that it is very solid. It uses a well-known plastic construction which has proved to be quite durable on other Sony lenses that I own. The mount is metal of course, and there is a gasket around the mount. This lens is weather sealed, so it should be able to withstand rain, dust, and cold temperatures. It uses a 72mm filter thread, which is a very common size. This filter size is significantly oversized, so there shouldn't be any issues with vignetting. A lens hood is also included in the box. It is pretty shallow because this is an ultra-wide lens, but it still helps a bit with flaring, and maybe even more importantly, it protects the front element. Regarding the control elements, there is once again a lot to talk about. There are two ways to zoom with this lens. The first way is to use the zoom ring, which is electronically coupled to the power zoom motor. It is extremely precise and completely smooth. The gearing is very well adjusted, so getting your desired focal length is not an issue at all. The second way is to use the zoom toggle on the left side. You can get extremely smooth zoom ins in video with both options. I think that the power zoom is a clear advantage of this lens. I don't think that it has any disadvantages at all, so I am very glad that Sony went this way. Also worth mentioning is that this is an internal zoom lens, in case that somebody hasn't noticed. The focus ring is also very smooth and precise. As expected, it uses a focus-by-wire system, but it is one of the best focus-by-wire systems that I have tested so far. Repetitive focus pulls are not an issue at all. PZ 16-35 also has an aperture ring. You can choose between operation with clicks and without clicks. Operation without clicks allows you to change the aperture smoothly in video. If you don't want to use the aperture ring, you can set it to A position and change the aperture in camera. There is also an iris lock which lets you lock the aperture in A position. AF/MF switch is located on the left side. Last but not least, we have a function button which can be set in the menu. Sony definitely didn't cut any corners when it comes to the control elements on this lens. So how about the optical qualities? As always, I have tested this lens with a very challenging 61MP sensor in Sony A7R IV-A. At 16mm, the central sharpness is fantastic or maximal right from f4. There is no room for improvement, so it stays this sharp at f5.6 and f8. The contrast starts to decrease at f11 due to the diffraction. The corner sharpness is again maximal right from f4. There is a bit of noise in the corners, but it isn't bad. We will get to that later. The sharpness stays the same at f5.6 and f8. The diffraction kicks in at f11. At 24mm, the central sharpness is once again perfect right from f4. Nothing changes at f5.6 and f8. The contrast starts to decrease at f11, but the resolution is still maximal. Optical perfection continues in the corners. As usual, we get perfect contrast and perfect resolution at f4, f5.6 and f8. There is a moderate amount of diffraction at f11, which is still perfectly usable. So what about 35mm? Still perfect? Yes, it is right from f4 in the center of the frame. f5.6 and f8 are perfect in terms of both sharpness and contrast, but there is a change at f11 when there is almost no visible diffraction. The corners at 35mm complete the perfect score with perfect sharpness and contrast right from f4 to f11. I don't see any diffraction at f11 this time. 16 to 35mm G is optically as good as it gets on this testing scene in combination with a 61MP sensor in A7R IV-A. Congratulations to Sony, they have done it once again. Optical qualities that we can see on this testing scene also translate to the real-world image quality. I have been getting very detailed and crisp images with both A7 IV and A7R IV. It doesn't really get any better than this in terms of the image quality. That is why I was shocked by the amount of distortion and vignetting. This lens absolutely relies on profile corrections. At 16mm there is a huge amount of barrel distortion and vignetting. At 24mm there is much less distortion and vignetting. At 35mm there isn't much of either, and the barrel distortion turns into pincushion distortion. Fortunately, profile corrections can do the magic, and the only trace of the distortion is a bit of noise in the corners at 16mm. Relying on profile correction allows the lens to be this small and it doesn't affect the real-world image quality, so I am fine with that. The minimum focus distance is 24 to 28 cm with maximal magnification of 0.23 times, which makes it a very solid semi-macro lens. You can use that to get interesting angles at 16mm or just standard close-up shots at 35mm. The image quality at the minimum focus distance is also excellent. The bokeh is what you would expect from an ultra-wide f4. There isn't much subject separation. It has 7 aperture blades and the rendering of the bokeh is fine but nothing special. As expected, the autofocus works perfectly. The focusing is as fast and as accurate as it gets with both A7 IV and A7R IV-A. Naturally, all of the smart features including bird eye AF and all tracking modes work as well. Autofocus mode is completely silent and it won't be picked up by in-camera microphone or by shotgun microphone. As expected from a power zoom lens, it is parfocal, which means that it can keep the focus as you are zooming in and out. This is very useful for videography. The amount of focus breathing is miraculously low for a lens that utilizes every trick to be as small as possible. There is basically no noticeable focus breathing at any focal length, so I don't need to use A7 IV's focus breathing compensation with this lens at all. This lens is not stabilized, but the in-body image stabilization in newer Sony cameras such as A7 IV or A7R IV is very effective at this focal range. For stills, you can use very slow shutter speeds, especially around 16mm. It is also more than sufficient for video, where you can also use active mode with digital stabilization. To sum up, Sony FEPZ 16 to 35mm f4G is another excellent lens from Sony. It offers unprecedented image quality to size and weight ratio. At 353 grams, it is extremely light and therefore portable. Despite that it relies on profile corrections at 16mm, it still provides perfect sharpness from corner to corner at any focal length from f4 to f8. Power zoom is very suitable for videography and it doesn't have any downsides for photography in this case. The controls are also more than complete. I think that f4 on ultra zoom makes a lot of sense, but it is a matter of preference and how you intend to use it. A bit of a problem is the price. It is quite expensive for an f4 zoom, but it is excellent in almost every aspect and it has that added power zoom functionality. If you have a budget for it and f4 aperture suits your intended use, I can highly recommend this lens. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.